Hello everyone, welcome to my Nancy Drew Dossier recap video. And recap is maybe not the most accurate term. This is really an appreciation video. I'm going to be talking about really all the great things about this series and talking about each of the games, but also about the one that didn't get released and how much I wish Her Interactive had continued it. I thought this was a wonderful style of hidden object game, and I found them quite fun and the setup really unique. And yeah, again, I just wish Her Interactive had continued with them. So yeah, this is why I'm sort of calling this more of an appreciation video, even though I've titled it as a recap, because I just want to be able to talk about this wonderful series that, in my mind, ended far too soon. So with that, let's take a look. So Nancy Drew Dossier, fast fun for busy detectives. So that was the idea behind these games, and I wanted to take a moment to just appreciate this cover art for the three games, two of which were released, the third was shelved, and then the series was subsequently cancelled. But yeah, just taking a look here at the artwork and just how beautiful these covers look. I really love the continuity across all of them. The Type A part of me is really appreciating that. But they just look so clean and crisp, and they look like they are part of their own series. Like they go together, and I really like that. I also like, in particular, having an actual dossier, so the top center there, to showcase that that's what this series is. This is a dossier series, and they've got this icon for it, which is perfect. It's accurate. There's just so much to point out and love. So we've got our top banner. It indicates it's a hidden object puzzle mystery. I think that's really important for people to know that's the type of game this is. And then that tagline underneath, fast fun for busy detectives, which, granted, in my opinion, is perhaps inaccurate. I don't know that I'd say that the games are fast. I've took about 3 hours to play through them each recently. But I think maybe the fast comes out of not really having to take your time to figure things out, just because of the way that these games are structured. And I'll dig into that a little bit soon. But yeah, sort of maybe an inaccurate tagline, but a really nice one. I like it. It does separate the series again from the adventure games. And then what else do we have here? We've got sort of at the bottom, another little note that's across all three new series from the creator of the #1 selling Nancy Drew PC adventure game series. So I like that they're pointing out that this is separate from the adventure games. They're not the same, but it is still a Her Interactive product. And then we've got sort of across the middle there, we've got this base, this image that relates to the stories that are being told in each game. So we've got the prop room in Lights, Camera, Curses. We see the jungle room with someone who's enjoying the spa for resorting to danger. And then we've got this cruise ship out in the water for a ship of shadows. And then in the lenses, or these little circles, we see objects that are sort of identified and stand out as being part of the game, things we might encounter, which I think is really neat. And it's busy without being too busy. To me, it just really showcases quite well what each story is about and what we might encounter. So, I really wanted to take some time just to look at and obviously admire these covers, and really just make it clear that I think these are wonderfully done. I think the art team did a superb job kind of coming up with these covers. And again, just having them look like they're all part of a series, they go together, is really great. And I just think that they look wonderful. They're really pleasing to the eye for me aesthetically. They're quite pleasing. So that's really the introduction by just starting at the box. This is the first thing you see when you're playing the game, or at least before we bought everything digitally. We got to hold these cool games and look at the covers and admire them that way. So with that, let's just quickly talk about the series themselves, or itself, and sort of what they entail. And there'll be a bit of comparing between this and the adventure series, just to showcase what the differences are. And one of the first things I always think about, and I don't know why this strikes me so much, but the Dossier series are not based on specific Nancy Drew books. So obviously they are derived from the books and this character that was created in the 1930s, but they're not associated with any specific title. And you compare that with the adventure series. So you take the very first game, Secrets Can Kill. That is based off of the Nancy Drew book, Secrets Can Kill, from the Case File series. Or look at Warnings at Waverly Academy, also a game from the adventure series, based off of The Curse of the Black Cat from the Digest paperback series. We don't have any of that with the Dossiers. The first game, Lights, Camera, Curses, although it may sound like the titles of two of the Nancy Drew Girl Detective series, it's not based off of those. Same with Resorting to Danger, not based off of a book. To my knowledge, Ship of Shadows was not based off of a book. And then the Dossier games are much more linear than the adventure series. So, and as I kind of mentioned a moment ago, they're really structured. I mean, the adventure series, Nancy can go to one room and go to another at your own will. So each player can play the game a little bit differently. The order of events might differ. Dossier games, not a chance. You have to do things in a particular order, and you can't just leave a room when you want to. So you're in a given space, say you're in Jasmine's guest room in Resorting to Danger, you have to find all the objects in her room first. You can't just leave because you're stuck or you can't find something and you want to go talk to someone. You have to finish up everything in that room before you can move forward. And same with talking with the suspects. Your conversations only move forward when you select the right answer from a series of options. So again, if we look at the adventure games, you might have a couple different things that Nancy could say in response to something with a character, and you could pick any one of them and they'd all be fine. A conversation would continue. That's not the case with the Dossier games. There's only one correct answer, and if you pick one that's not correct, you're not going to move forward. Nancy's not going to say the line. And it's really like a test, making sure you're paying attention to what's going on. And sort of the really big main thing is that the Dossier games are hidden object games. That's not the sole focus of the adventure series, although we're obviously looking for items and adding them to our inventory. We don't have an inventory in the Dossier games. We're just seeking objects in a space and for the most part only using them in that moment in that space. We don't add them to an inventory. There's a small exception with Lights, Camera, Curses with some lock picking, but otherwise, you're not carrying things around with you. There are also some mini games throughout the Dossier games, and they repeat. It's the small selection of the same type of puzzle, although the versions sort of change each time. You're not solving the exact same puzzle each time you encounter a mini game. And one of the really neat things, going back to hidden objects and how that's set up in this game, is you're not only looking for objects, like in many hidden object games, you're looking for like 7 cats that could be anywhere at odd angles and not make any sense. That's not the way the Dossier games are set up. You are looking for specific items that are purposeful, and then you pair them together. You make these matches, and with that you progress through a scene. So a good example of this comes up in the first game, Lights, Camera, Curses. You have this generator that's run out of fuel. So you need to twist off the cap. The cap is stuck. So you need this wrench to twist it off. So you click on the cap, then you click on the wrench. You pair these two items together so that you're twisting off the cap with the wrench. You then have this opening where you can pour fuel. Select that opening, as well as select fuel jug, and that's how you're filling the generator with fuel. So you're matching things, and there's intent. There's a reason for doing these pairs. So that's, to me, something that's really interesting and unique about the Dossier series, and that take on how hidden objects can be utilized. They're not just being looked for, but you're actually using them in some capacity. So I think that's pretty cool. Something else that's unique to the Dossier games and not part of the adventure series is you get to earn points. And you do that when you correctly match items together or when you select the right dialogue response. So that's pretty cool. And those points continue to grow and grow, and you gain more points as long as you don't make any errors. If you make a mistake, you don't lose points, but the amount you gain when you make a correct match or selection isn't as high, and you have to build up again, and that's pretty cool. So it's an interesting setup, and I like that. The Dossier games are also broken down into what they've called chapters, so they're like little segments within these games, which we don't have in the adventure series. And you can access these chapters and review them by accessing Nancy's journal, which you have access to just on the main user interface while playing the game. And so you can review the chapters, you can look at your evidence, any notes, and you can also rewatch scenes, which I think is really cool. You don't have that at all in the adventure games, so that's pretty awesome. And then finally, they have this arcade feature with the Dossier games, and this allows you to play the mini games over and over without having to play through the mystery again. You do have to play through the game at least once to unlock them, but then you can play these over to your heart's content. And I have spent hours playing in the arcade mode, especially with Resorting to Danger. There are two there that I particularly enjoy. But that's pretty cool, and especially considering that I know a lot of fans of the adventure series have asked for the games and puzzles from those games to be sort of released on their own, either as an app to put on their phone and play, or it's just a compilation of games that you could buy and play on your computer. That has yet to happen. I don't know if that ever will happen, but it is something that has been included with the Dossier games in what they call the arcade mode, which is pretty awesome. So that essentially sums up what you need to know about the series, and with that, let's actually look at some of the games. So the very first one, this is Lights, Camera, Curses, Nancy Drew Dossier number 1, her Interactive's first hidden object game. So this was their introduction, or our introduction to the Dossier series. And here we actually see different cover art than we did a moment ago. This is the cover art I have from my copy of Lights, Camera, Curses. This is what they had originally done for it. And then when the second game came out, they revamped the art so that they all match that thing that I pointed out that I like so much. So this game was released in December of 2008, quite a long time ago now. And the plot of this story is that Nancy is invited to the film set of this movie called Pharaoh. And it's the site of a bunch of accidents, and there is a mischievous black cat roaming around. This cat happens to be taking a bunch of the heat for the accidents. And Nancy is tasked with finding out who's behind the accidents, but also with looking for this lost film footage from the original Pharaoh film. So she's got a couple different things that she's actually looking into while she's at this movie set. So that's pretty cool. And then Nancy interacts with 4 characters, and 4 is pretty standard. We're used to that with the adventure series. That's how it's typically set up. We have Molly McKenna, Arthur Hitchens, George Jackson, and Eda Brooks. And one thing that's unique to this story within the Dossier series, it's not included in the second, there are hidden audio diaries scattered throughout the game, and Nancy can find them and access them through her journal and listen to them. And they lend to a deeper story. They really provide backstory to what was going on during the original filming of Pharaoh, and sort of what was happening at that time, and that interesting storyline. So that's pretty cool. That was a unique feature. And you don't have to find these diaries. You don't have to access them. It's really optional. So that's pretty cool. So now I just wanted to take a look at some of the locations that we see in this game, and really the point of this is admiration of the artwork. So here's one of our first ones. And it's this structure outside, this brick building. We see it set at night, and we're really just taking a look at the artwork. It's quite different than what we saw in the adventure series. And we see that Nancy hasn't collected items, but she's highlighted things that she can find or use or manipulate in some way. Yeah, so that's what these little lenses are. And then there's one that's a little bit larger that has this, it's almost like a dialogue box. And Nancy doesn't say what's written there. That's something for us as a player that we get to read. So it just adds a little more to it. And at the bottom, we have Nancy's action bar. It's lit up in blue, which means that we can interact with the item that's currently selected in one capacity or another. And you have to select the right option. And that changes in the second game, the way that looks, and we'll see that in a little bit. But while we're focusing at the bottom of the screen, we might as well just look at that interface. So we can see our points that I noted we gain in the bottom left, right above our menu option. And just to the right of that, we have Nancy's journal. So that's where we go to if we want to review evidence or rewatch scenes or access the audio diaries that we find. Then we've got that action bar. Again, that's lit up in blue, meaning that we can actually utilize it right now. And then beside that, we have our goal. So if we're forgetting what it is we need to do, our goal's right there, and you can click on it for a little bit more information. And then right off to the right in the bottom right corner, we have a 0, and that's a little indicator for how many items we need to still find in a scene. So they've all been selected in this case, but we'll see that number change soon. by looking at another screenshot. So here we go. This is in Arthur's office, so inside that building. And you can see that in the bottom right corner, there's a number 1. So there's one more object still defined. And if you look at the ceiling, you're going to find it. There it is. But this is really kind of a way to showcase that Nancy can find all these different things before having to match them up. You don't have to use them right away. You can seek them out and then sort of figure out the right order in which to do things. It gives you a chance to make sure you're doing things in the right sequence and getting those points to add up and up and up. Another room to take a quick look at is the prop room. This is now a tidied space, but it just gives an idea of what Nancy's working with in the environment we get to play in. And we see Nancy's got some dialogue up at the top. It says, "There, all clean, Hannah would be proud," just to show sort of that setup. And we see we've got 2 items we still need to find. Action bar again is not lit up. But yeah, what a beautiful bit of artistry here. And then the last space I want to show is the dressing room. Again, just to showcase the artwork and all this hard work that the artists put into it. And again, to show it's a very different feel from the adventure series. But yeah, I just love them. I admire all this work. So moving on from there, let's just take a quick look at some of the mini games and what the bonus rounds look like. So the mini games, like I said, we repeat throughout the games, but they sort of change. It's not the exact same one over and over. So in this case, we're doing some decoding using hieroglyphs, and how we use them and where we're decoding is not necessarily the same. So this is just one instance of how it looks, but it is an activity we get to do a couple of times. And then we've got this smoothie making mini game that we do twice in the game. And of course we can do more often by playing and accessing the arcade mode. But basically we're just filling in the orders. We want to match what's being shown on the left. And then this third one I want to show is lock picking. This is sort of the most complex one that we see in the game. We might see more complicated ones in arcade mode. And much like with smoothie orders, we're just trying to match what's being shown, although in this case it's on the left side. So trying to match that arrangement of tumblers. So those are the mini games. And then just for our bonus round, it's a matching game. Sort of like if you're thinking of the Curse of Blackmore Manor and playing Constellation Match, we can't see what's on the back sides or front sides of these. You flip 2 over, see what they are. If they match, that's great. You get points. If not, they flip back over and you're just trying to pair them up. And this is a timed activity too. And we get to do this quite a lot in Lights, Camera, Curses, and is maybe one of my favorite parts of this dossier. I really like doing this matching bonus round. I think that was a lot of fun. So let's just take a quick look again at all those bits of artwork. So we've got our locations and some puzzles and activities. So really beautiful work that was put into this first dossier. And that's not it. Next, let's take a look at the characters whom Nancy interacts with. So we've got Molly McKenna, Ida Brooks, Arthur Hitchens, and George Jackson. So these are the characters. And we see that they are 3D characters, and they move around at times. Not always, and if you play the game, you'll understand what I mean. But they're sort of the only part that's truly animated in this game. Although we sometimes see a cat running around, it's not in 3D. That's mostly 2D art with the exception of the suspects. So I just wanted to show them off as well. I thought that would be really neat. And a big part of this too is what you'll notice is that they each have sort of a colored theme to them, and their frames are all in different colors. I know I didn't intentionally do this, but I've kind of gone in a rainbow theme here. So Molly is red, Ida is yellow, Arthur's green, George is blue. And when you're talking with them, their texts come up in those colors as well. And this is really helpful when you have more than one character in a scene and interacting. You can follow the dialogue by just looking at the color, so you know who's talking if you're not able to listen to it. So I thought that was really brilliant. That was a neat change too. Quite different from the adventure games. So that's that for the first game. Now we're looking at Resorting to Danger. So this is Nancy Drew Dossier number 2. Obviously her drag of second in an object game. Just to state the obvious again. So here we are back to that cover art that we saw before. It's the only version that was released for Resorting to Danger. So this game was released in August of 2009. So less than a year after the first game came out. And I think that's really interesting. I mean, we were used to her interactive producing 2 games a year, and this actually meant 3 games a year when you take into account the adventure series. So I just really wanted to point that out, that they were able to put out 2 games, 2 of the Dossier games within less than a year of each other. So in this case, Nancy's been invited to the Redondo Center of Rejuvenation to investigate these bombings. And the guests don't know that they're bombings. They've been blamed as other accidents, but the manager knows better and really wants Nancy to investigate. And Nancy goes undercover and she helps out with relaxation therapies and creating products, and sort of more of a theme going on for her, I find, in this game than in the first. And Nancy actually interacts with 6 characters rather than 4, so there's this bit of an increase here. So we've got Nick Blesky, Cassidy Jones, Helfton Helgeson, Mrs. Montague, Jasmine Ivy, and Joanna Brown. So quite a few more suspects. And one of the unique things about this game, so something we don't see in the first one, is that there are 6 possible endings, and we certainly don't see that with the adventure games either. There are 2, granted, in the adventure games where the endings can be tweaked a little bit, but primarily we don't have alternate endings, which is what we have here. You could have any of the 6 suspects be a culprit, and depending on which ending you've ultimately selected, the events that follow will alternate and change and be different per character. So that's really cool. I thought that was great and really adds to the replayability of this game, because you could get a different game each time you play it. It really is your choice. This is up to you as a player. You can choose who you want your culprit to be, but I really appreciate that, because it adds to this whole series and to this game in particular. And it was really easy for me to play this game 6 times, not that long apart, because I wanted to see what each ending was like and what the motivations for each culprit were. So as with Lights, Camera, Curses, let's take a look at these beautiful locations. So here we've got our entrance to the Redondo. And one of the neat things about this is we actually see one of our suspects, which we didn't see in Lights, Camera, Curses. We didn't see them in the spaces typically. So, and there's a little bit more animation. Cassidy will be moving around. There's even a little fish in a fishbowl over on the left that moves around and swims. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I just love this space. It's so much lighter than Lights, Camera, Curses, and it to me really draws me in. I find it really inviting and warm. So just beautiful and very colorful too. So, and very similar as far as interface. So we've got our score and menu, access to our journal. Our action bar right now is empty, and you'll see a little bit of that in a moment, how that's going to look different when it actually has options in it, and then no goal or items to find in this particular shot. But now let's take a look at the jungle room. Here again we have a character who happens to be present, although I have to say that Mudbath looks awfully short. I don't quite know how she fits in there. But again, what a beautiful space. I love all the artwork, that greenery, just again looks so beautiful, and I want to spend time there. But here, if we look at the very bottom, we have our action bar, which looks quite different than it did in Lights, Camera, Curses. And I prefer the action bar in the second game. There's more of a continuity as far as what the icons look like, and they do alter between rooms and your activities and scenes, which I'll point out in a moment because it'll be a good way to illustrate it. But I just like the look of it. It looks cleaner, and I think it's far less confusing than the setup from the first game. Yeah, there's a beautiful space. So if we look at our action bar here, we see things are a little different. We still have press, we have pull, but then our turn has become flip. So we get to do something different. And instead of scratch, we have shake. So that's kind of neat. Those change depending on what part of the game you're at. And you might see the same things come back. We also see that Nancy now has a cell phone in her action bar. So this is something she had to find. And it's only there temporarily. It's only going to be there in this scene. And here I have a couple items selected that Nancy's found. And I've got 2 that are larger. This is when I was pairing them. So we've got the cell phone with the contact and password information. And then we've got this laptop with a login. We need the password. So click on the phone and the laptop, and you pair those items so that Nancy can access the laptop. So I thought that was a really good way to illustrate what the pairing looks like. And then for our final space, I just want to show off the lab because it's so different from the other rooms that we see for resorting into danger. And I thought this was a great thing to highlight. So once again, I've got a bunch of items found and they've got the lenses on them with one selected over on the left in that little dialogue box that, again, Nancy doesn't read, but we as a player can read ourselves. It says, "Your name is Bean." So it just adds a bit of depth, which is really cool. And yeah, just a very unique space. And again, our action bar has a few things different. And in this case, pull is now turn, and we don't have the cell phone anymore because that was only used in that one room. So yeah, those are our locations, or some of the locations for resorting to danger. And then we'll take a quick look at the mini games and bonus rounds, just like we did with Lights, Camera, Curses. So we have this paper caper. We do this an awful lot in this game, and the way I said that might have made it sound like I dread it. I actually love it. I think this is a great mini game. This is one of the ones I play all the time in arcade mode. But yeah, you do this often as you're dealing with these notes from the Mad Bomber, which is really cool. So you're just trying to pair up these halves of letters together, and then you wind up doing this unscrambling for an answer to a clue, which is pretty cool. My other favorite one is this molecule match, and you're turning these molecules so you've got the same color within these red circles, and you might have to drop other molecules by making matches outside of red circles to complete these, which is probably doesn't make sense for me to say it that way, but if you play it, you'll learn, you'll get it. But yeah, what a great activity. And I also just love the colors. It's almost pastel-y, but it's not quite, like, it's not that muted, but it's not overly bright. It just feels kind of cheerful. And yeah, this is a really lovely activity. I play quite a lot in arcade mode. And then I also want to show this one for the emergency override that we, again, do quite a bit. Pretty much almost to the same extent as with the paper caper. We have to solve these puzzles quite often, so you're trying to connect a pathway from one end to the other, and it's a timed activity. So that makes it a little bit trickier. And then the last thing is just to look at the bonus round, and this is structured quite differently than from the first game. Whereas with the first game, the bonus rounds come up quite often, and we're matching items, we're trying to find pairs. This one, we only have bonus rounds twice, and those two are the same structure, and it's defined these moving things and putting them where they belong. So in this case, we are trying to catch rats, these rodents that are jumping around, they're moving about, and you have to catch them and return them to their cage. The other bonus round comes shortly after this and is a very similar setup. It's just not rats, and it's a different room. So that's what the bonus rounds look like in Resorting to Danger, and I don't actually find them that enjoyable. I mean, they are better associated, I guess, with the story. They fit into the storyline better than the other bonus rounds, but I just don't find them quite as fun. So let's take a look then again at what that all looks like, locations and activities. Just again, that artwork and how wonderful and beautiful it is, and just admiring that art team and what they did. Yeah, it's just gorgeous. And before we finish off Resorting to Danger, we've got our characters again to go over. So again, we've got 6 rather than 4. So we have Cassidy Jones, Nick Blesky, Mrs. Montague, Helfton Helgeson. I was going to call her Ida Brooks, but no, that's her sister. Spoiler alert, Jasmine Ivy and Joanna Brown. And again, they each have their own colored frame and theme to them. So Cassidy is this sort of plum purple. Nick is this light blue. Mrs. Montague is yellow. Helfton is red. Jasmine Ivy is green, which is quite suitable for her name. And Joanna Brown has this orange. And we do have a scene where they're all talking together. So it's great because each of their texts are in the color associated with them. So it makes it really easy to follow along if you can't distinguish the voices or get confused or cannot hear or don't have that setting on your computer. So that's really neat. I like these characters. So from there, we're going to move on to the last game that wasn't even released. This is Ship of Shadows, Nancy Drew Dossier, number 3. Her Interactive's canceled 3rd hidden object game. And I say that with a great deal of sadness. So let's take a look at this game again. So we did get the artwork for it. It was shelved in 2010. So again, thinking about the dates of when the other games came out, December 2008 for the first one, August of 2009. I would presume possibly late 2009 or early 2010 was probably when this game was originally anticipated to be released. It wasn't, and the following year it was cancelled, as was the whole series. Yes, and my poor heart aches again, just saying that. But we did get some information about the game both before its cancellation and even afterward. We were able to learn a little bit. So what we knew is that Nancy was invited on a cruise aboard a recently renovated ship. So it's kind of a neat opportunity and a very different storyline to anything we'd had to that point and even afterward. I mean, in the adventure series prior to this, we had Danger on Deception Island, and Nancy's occasionally on a tour boat, but she doesn't spend a great deal of time there. And later on, we got Sea of Darkness. Again, Nancy's exploring quite a larger ship, but she's not on a cruise. She's not actually out to sea or, sailing or anything. So I always thought this would have been a really interesting premise, and was really looking forward to what this would entail. And I remember talking about it on the message board and asking people, what do you think is going to happen? And what do you expect for characters? What do you want for characters? Yeah, I was really excited for this. And that sort of ties in with the next point. What we did know is that while Nancy's aboard the vessel, people disappear, and there are other strange occurrences which lead her to investigate this ship. So, and that was sort of going along with some of the questions I asked on the message board at the time. So, what else do you think is going to happen? What are some of the strange occurrences? And let's talk about characters. Who do we think our characters are going to be? And we've found, these weren't ever officially announced, but we've found some characters online. It seems like there may have been 5, maybe more, maybe less. It's sort of hard to say, and I'll dive into that when we look at the characters. But we had Maurice Badeau, Eva Maruccio, Aidan Bode, this unnamed suspect, and possibly a woman named Julia. But yeah, I remember wondering before we found this artwork years later, would we see maybe like a family aboard the ship? And are our suspects only going to be crew members, or will they be guests? I didn't really know. And we've kind of figured out some of it based on looking at the characters, but really don't have those answers. But we'll look at that more in a little bit. So let's take a look at the 2 locations that we've seen. So we've got this museum space aboard the ship, and I just look at all the detail and it just looks amazing. And I'm so curious as to what we would have been able to do in this space. So if we look at sort of the bottom left there, we've got this case, and I can't remember, unfortunately, the name of this device, but for producing Morse code, that's what it looks like we've got down there for communicating. And I wonder, that book, is that a log book? Is it information about how to communicate? What is that? Would we have been able to take a look at that in this game? And we have some other displays throughout, and on the back wall we have these portraits of the ship, presumably the vessel that Nancy's on, and between them we have this giant organ. What role does that play? What's its purpose? And then these other intricacies, like we've got a lot of, we've got this octopus theme. It's not all that well illustrated here, but the organ, sort of in the center, sort of has the legs of an octopus. If we look above the organ, on the ceiling there, we see octopi rather, drawn throughout. And even at the base of the stairs on those podiums, if you will, I don't really know what else to call them, there are octopi. So yeah, really curious about what this space was about. I mean, it's a museum, but what would we have looked at and what would we have learned? I really, really wish I knew. I want to play it and find out. And then our second location is this game room. So this looks like evening, and even the other image, I would guess it's nighttime when Nancy's in these 2 spaces. And so we've got that desk sort of at the back there, so probably for one of the team members on the cruise ship. Along the left wall, there's some computers, so presumably for guests to access. Above that is the portrait of the room that we're looking at, which is kind of funny. And not a very busy space. It's fairly clean. But if you look down at the lower right corner, it looks like there's a dress hanging off of a chair. And I always think that's probably an item Nancy has to pick up. I mean, why else is that there? And what else hasn't been added to this room. Yeah, that just what would have happened here? What would Nancy have been seeking out? All these questions that we don't have answers to. And the only way to get those answers, aside from her interactive just telling us, would be for them to finish the game and release it. Could you please? That would be great. But yeah, that's it for locations that have been found online. They weren't officially released by Her Interactive, but the artists have them on their own portfolio sites. So then we've got a puzzle and bonus round idea as well. So it's puzzle. This goes with our octopus theme. You can see that right in the center there. And clearly this is on the organ that we saw in the museum space. And I'm really curious. I mean, this looks like a matching puzzle. So we have to match, I think, these colored circles to the appropriate images on the organ. And it looks like Her Interactive was trying to cover up, or the artists rather, were trying to cover up what is supposed to go where. I mean, I don't know how well you can see this, but where that red circle is with the rainbow, it's pointing to that outer ring. Behind it, to me, that looks like a log. So I think that orange circle with the campfire is probably supposed to go there. That's my guess. And the yellow one, I don't know what that is, if that's meant to be like butter or bread or something else entirely. I don't know what that's supposed to go with, but behind it, it looks like a mug. It's like the green circle with the tea bag, I would imagine, pairs with that. I have no idea what's behind the dove. I can't make heads or tails of what that's supposed to be. I don't know what goes with the spoon or that bee or wasp. And that other one there, I don't know if it's meant to indicate just a ball or bouncing ball. But I wonder, does that pair with the darker blue circle with the snow to indicate like a snowball? Is that how those pair together? I don't know. Again, more questions I'm curious about, and I want to play this and solve it. And then it looks like our bonus round is much like that of Lights, Camera, Curses, another matching game with a little oomph to it. So we don't just have colors and numbers, but we have this nautical theme to the circles as well, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it looks like Her Interactive was going back to that. And I mean, they were still learning. So the third game is going to come from things that they learned from the first two games and maybe adding different things. I mean, this is a very unique puzzle that we see over on the left. I don't think that really copies anything from the previous two games. So yeah, that's all we have for puzzles and bonus rounds. I don't know that anything else was ever posted again on the artists' social media pages. But next, let's look at our characters. And to me, this is one of the most exciting things. I remember when I first found some of these. So let's start off with, we have Maurice. Based on his dress, he's going to be someone who works aboard the ship. But in what capacity? I don't know what that uniform is an indicator of. But I'm curious, what's his role? And based on the coloring of his uniform, I'm assuming he would have sort of a green frame around him. So if we think back to the other characters, how they had their own associated color, I would guess green for him. And then we have Eva, who I don't know if she meant to be the ship's captain or first mate. Again, just based on her uniform, I think she would have sort of that higher, I don't know if you want to call it a higher authority role, but someone who's sort of in charge to me is what her dress, her attire indicates. And I would assume that her frame would be yellow. That sort of matches her hair color as well as what you see on her uniform on her shoulders. So yellow is what I would guess for her. And then we've got Aiden. What role does he play? I mean, it looks like he's wearing sort of a branded shirt, like a uniform, but not necessarily part of the ship crew. So I wonder, was he providing like a tour, or is he like a guide? Does he do an exhibit or something? So working on the ship, but not as part of the regular cabin crew, anything like that. A different type of role, providing a separate service aboard the ship. And as far as his frame color, I would guess too. So maybe like a blue teal based on his shirt, or would they go orange to sort of match his hair? I think it could go either way. But curious minds want to know. What would it have been for him? So these are our three characters who we know for sure. We've got names and a really good idea of what they'd look like. The next two are more of question marks. This next one here, I apologize. This is the only image or set of images I have for him. I haven't been able to find him on the artist's online portfolio. these are obviously taken from the old Russian site, and I've had them saved for years. And I'm sorry, I feel like the website really mars the images, and I wanted to get rid of them, and it just didn't turn out well. But yeah, so another person who we now have a 3D model for as well, which I think is really exciting. So they seem to have made a lot of progress with him. And again, the question is, what was his role? Who was he supposed to be on board the ship? And what's his name? We don't have a name for him. But he's got this little blazer on and a tie, so it seems like he's probably someone who works on the ship as well. I can't help but picture him being in that game room and sitting at that desk and providing some sort of service to the guests there. But yeah, really curious. And as far as his frame color, I'd say sort of like a plum color. Yeah, which would be a little bit different. But yeah, it seems like they made a lot of progress with him, given that they've got a 3D model. And I wish I had better pictures and a name. And then our final possibility is this character of Julia. So we don't have colored sketches like we did for the previous 4. But her sketch really matches those of the characters for the first game. You can find those online. So what was she meant to be part of the Nancy Drew game? I don't know. We're really just guessing. The art style matches that of the characters from the Dossier game, so there's a good chance. But she, I guess, hasn't been fully developed and fleshed out. My guess is that she is a guest aboard the ship, and this is just based on her dress again, as she doesn't appear to be wearing a uniform in this sketch. But yeah, wondering about her. So there we go. These are all of our characters, potential characters anyways, that we've been able to find online for Ship of Shadows, and none of these were officially released. And Her Interactive, if you see this, could you give us more, or at least the artists? Her Interactive might not have these, but I'd love to see more of these characters and what else we haven't found yet. So it's just so neat. So the last thing I wanted to touch on is the arcade mode. So I don't have an image for Ship of Shadows, but these are the screens for Lights, Camera, Curses and Resorting to Danger. Exact same format, and you just get to see what the activities are. And there's some arrows because there are a few. They only show 3 at a time. But these are the mini games that you get to play during your case and then have access to afterwards, and can just play over and over again. So, and the kind of neat thing is that they've got some high scores, which granted are very different between the 2 games. I mean, first place and for smoothie making for Lights, Camera, Curses is 1,000 points, and then you look over at Speed Diffuser for Resorting to Danger, and that's 700,000 points. They really changed the point system between the 2 games. I don't know why. Again, curious minds want to know. But I think it's kind of neat that they've got some scores already created, and the names match the characters from the game. So, Molly, Arthur, George, Lydia. Lydia we don't interact with, but she's this gossip columnist who comes up in both games. So that's kind of cool. Or we've got Mrs. Montague, Halfton, Cassidy, Nick, Mr. Mingles. That's Mrs. Montague's dog. So, yeah, I think that's just really cute. But this arcade mode is just great. So you can select whichever minigame you want to play, and then you can play it. But yeah, really a great addition. And if we look over at the first one here on the left, it's not the one that's selected, but over to the right, you can see that the bonus round is one that you can play over and over. That's not an option with Resorting to Danger, because there are only 2 styles of that bonus round, and yeah, I don't think you could really turn that into an arcade game, but that's great. I do like that it's one that we can access for Lights, Camera, Curses. So there we go. I just wanted to give you guys a quick little look at arcade mode. So that's basically it, you guys. That's the Nancy Drew Dossier games. Fast fun for busy detectives. Just a wonderful series that I could talk about for ages. Just this wonderful take on a hidden object style game. Again, these games have stories, and there's a purpose behind seeking out the objects and matching them. You're not just looking for them, but you're actually doing something with them, and it drives the story forward. And I think it was just so brilliant. I really liked this. Like, hidden object games have never really held that much interest for me. But these ones do, and so much so that I'm really bummed still to this day that the series hasn't moved forward. And, it's only been 13 years since they shelved Ship of Shadows. But yeah, I would love for this game to come back to life, or the series rather, to come back to life. Even if just Ship of Shadows was finished, I think that would be really wonderful. And I think they got about halfway through, that's my understanding. And I don't know what that entails, like if all of the script work was done, or how much of the artwork. I assume that not all the art stuff was done. But I would really love to know more specifically what was completed and what was decided. I think that would be really neat to know. Yeah, and I'd really like to know fully why the series was canceled. I'm trying to remember what we were told at the time, and I think part of it was just that they had other projects going on, and that this series was maybe not worth the effort and time. And I don't know if there was a question of affordability with continuing in this direction. But it didn't last very long. Again, repeating myself from the beginning. The first game came out end of 2008. Second game, middle of 2009. And then they shelved the third game in 2010 and then canceled in 2011. That's actually not that long a period of time. And when you look at how a new business starts, it typically takes, if I understand or remember correctly, 2 years for you to finally break even and then to make a profit. Or maybe you're breaking even, but to fully make a profit, I think, is 2 years into the venture. And they didn't even get that far. They seem to have called it quits pretty early, right? And I wonder, had the team given it more time, would they have found their fan base? And this certainly isn't a series for everybody, and I think a lot of the Nancy Drew fans of the adventure series were disappointed because they were expecting something more like the adventure games, and they're not meant to be like the adventure games. They are quite obviously different. And we've got at the very top, it says it's a hidden object puzzle mystery, and that tagline of fast fun for busy detectives, which again, I don't think they're not fast. They're much more structured, so you don't have to take quite as much time to think through what you're trying to do. But the games themselves are still fairly lengthy. So a lot of the adventure fans might not have enjoyed these, but that doesn't mean that people who didn't play Nancy Drew before might not find these games. So maybe there's a hidden object community who didn't play the adventure Nancy Drew games because that wasn't their thing. But had they been given more time to find this series, maybe they'd have fallen in love with it, and maybe the series could have really grown and thrived. And I'd like to think it would have. There's so much potential, and as I said, for myself, I love this series. I think it's brilliant. So much so that I started writing a fourth game, even though I'm not part of the team. But I was so excited and thinking, if they finish Ship of Shadows, this is what I would love to see for the fourth one. And I wrote out descriptions and backgrounds for the characters. I think there were 6 of them, and the whole premise for the story, and I wrote the dialogue for when Nancy starts the game, and was writing down details about what the characters look like and what their frame colors would be, and all these details and ideas about puzzles. I was so keen, and still am to this day because I'm that much of a nerd. But I was just so excited about it, and would love to have seen the series continue even beyond Ship of Shadows. I mean, I'll settle for a completion of Ship of Shadows. Even to this day, I still want it pushed through. But yeah, I really enjoyed this series, and I know it might be years later, but it would bring me such joy to see this third game released. And if there's a way for us to entice you Interactive, let us know, because I think fans would do it. I mean, would a Kickstarter do it? I don't know. And I mean, and not to be critical, and I know there's a lot of criticism about this, but it's been a long time between releases of the adventure series for the last 2 games. I kind of wonder, could Ship of Shadows been worked on, during that time between releases? And this, I think, might have made some fans, maybe not all of them, but happy. It would have appeased us by having still a game that a bunch of us are anticipating and excited for to have been released. So, yeah, and I would still love to see this game finished and available in stores, because I don't do downloads. Yeah, it just would be great to me to to have this game finished. And with the original plan. I don't want to see any changes because I know that sometimes changes do happen and it's not always for the better. I would love to just see what the original plan was. I don't want to see any deviations from that because I suspect that what Her Interactive had going for this would have been wonderful. So that's really my piece on this. This is, to me, a great side gig that Her Interactive ended too soon. And I think it would have been great if they'd given it a little bit more time. Let it find its roots. Let it get established. Let other gamers find it, because if they weren't already part of the Nancy Drew community, it might take them a bit more time. And I would love for people to provide that feedback, be it here, but even just contact Her Interactive. If this is a series you enjoy, let them know. I don't know how much of a difference that would make, but I think it's important to give feedback, and always do that politely. Keep that in mind. But I'd love for this to somehow see the light of day, Ship of Shadows. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you ever so much for watching this recap, or again, it's not really a recap video. It's an appreciation video for the Nancy Drew Dossier series. Fast, fun for busy detectives. Wonderful games that I enjoy ever so much. And I'm deeply saddened still to this day that Ship of Shadows was not finished. And continue to hope that it will be one day. Thanks again, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye now.